So some aspects of the past are more challenging. They're challenging in the respect that the actual research is difficult to undertake and the answers aren't readily forthcoming. And the truths that are remembered and uncovered are painful. And Michael Hawkes's family history truly falls into this challenging category. So he was taken into the charge of the Roman Catholic Church at the age of 5 months, and he was subsequently adopted and sent to America. He was removed from his homeland. He was denied the knowledge and care of his family. And his childhood would become entwined with the international scandal of the Roman Catholic abuse cases, began coming to public knowledge in the 1980s. We're now going to speak to Michael Hawkes and his wife Susan about their quest to trace Michael's birth story and reunite him with his family, to learn about the research, the genealogical research into the book that they have written together. So welcome, Michael and Susan. Thank you so much for your time. So normally when I speak to authors, I like to say I really enjoyed your book, and that's a tough thing to say with you guys. I did enjoy it, and I found it a really, really valuable read, but it's a tough read. It's a tough story you had to tell, didn't you? And I don't know which question to ask first. So I'm going to go for simple, Michael. Can you scroll us back to your early years as a little boy? And it must have been so hard being denied all that knowledge. So what were some of your earliest memories? Can you remember even your very early years in Ireland? Can you remember any of your time in the care of the nuns?
That's a common question. And my answer is I don't have any early memories of Ireland at all. Maybe if anything, the earliest memories might be of me and my twin sister when we came into the home in America, the new home, the adopted home. And just the feeling of bewilderment, like, where am I? I think after being in the orphanage for 3 years, you become just a little accustomed to the orphanage and the people in there. And then all of a sudden you're put into this new home in California. And I would say that the memories growing up there were not the best. And very difficult. There were moments that were good, but moments of self-reflection were, I would answer that question to say to you that my life really didn't start till I was 19 years of age.
Mm-hmm. So you're very isolated, weren't you, as a child? It definitely through the book, you get that strong sense you're isolated and pretty much the connections that you do have with people are negative.
But yes, and I was just reflecting just yesterday that when the Irish system put me in the orphanage, I was sentenced. And we found the court order sentence. And the sentence read, sentence for not having a home until the age of 16 in the orphanage. And then I was, of course, taken away from the orphanage. But the fact of it is that you're looking at your history through paperwork. You're looking at your history through someone else's eyes. There's not a lot of people that recollect, but there is just a tremendous amount of me reading papers and being stunned. Susan and I just found 100 pages of, Susan can speak to that, 100 pages of letters written back and forth to the orphanage and the newly adopted parents, and how they were scheming to get my sister and I out of Ireland into this home in California. And within the church, they were lying to each other, within their own church. And it's just amazing to observe these letters about your life. I mean, can you imagine? Because I didn't bond, I'm sure, with anybody. I'm sure I did not.
Yeah, we found these documents. The original documents, with the back and forth with the nuns at St. Patrick's Guild, between 1995 and 2014, when we finally did make some breakthroughs because the internet was suddenly available. We got several dozen documents. But just with the new law in Ireland that you can actually have more access to your records, In October of last year, we put in Mike's application to TUSLA, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's TULSA, and it's the child welfare system in Ireland. They put us in the queue, and it took almost 6 months to get those documents to us, but they were literally copies back and there were over 100 documents, and many of them we had seen, but at least half of them we hadn't seen before. But there were documents back and forth between the social worker in California and the nuns back in Ireland at St. Patrick's Guild, between Michael's adoptive Monsignor Hawk's uncle, his adopted parents, and the Reverend Mother at St. Patrick's Guild, and the office of John McQuaid, the Archbishop in Ireland in 1961, and they really were really scheming. I mean, they literally said, let's not include Catholic Charities because they will deny this adoption because we don't qualify. And so they literally were scheming between one another to facilitate this adoption because they knew that it was financially lucrative. There were comments about money being sent back and forth between Monsignor Hawks and his adopted parents to the nuns. And so it was truly child trafficking and being paid for access to children.
That's shocking. I mean, just to scroll back to you're both now clearly immersed in the paperwork, and Michael, even though you self-deprecating and say you can't do it, clearly both of you now know a lot about all of the research, the organizations that you need to contact, how to interpret the documents. But Susan, from a family history point of view, when you meet somebody and you hear their story and then maybe they have some puzzles about their life, and as a family historian, you think, I know how to help that person. So let's scroll back to those decades when you first met, when you were at university. And so when Michael started telling you his story, at what point did you have that family history moment where you go, I know how to help this guy?
Well, I can start that. So I'm going to start that, Helen. It's a wonderful story. So we met on a street outside the college, and we talked, and then we talked again. And the usual conversation is, what's your favorite movie? That's one of the first questions asked. And she said, Oliver Twist. And I said, oh, what's your favorite book? And she said, Oliver Twist. And in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, well, hell, I've got a better story than Oliver Twist for you. And then I just she was just taken with the story, and as I could unfold it, and then it has been part of our life.
Oh, truly.
For 45 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I remember, this moment is indelibly etched. We were sitting at the college library, and he begins telling me that he's an Irish orphan, and he really knows nothing about his family. And, lights were just going off for me because I come from a family where, genealogy was really important. And, my grandmothers gave us journals, of their grandparents, and so we had this wonderful history, and Mike knew nothing about his family, and so it was like, oh my goodness, this is such an adventure that I would love to join you on. I didn't say that because we basically had 2 dates, but
it worked well into my plans.
It's amazing the powers of family history, isn't it?
It is.
Susan, even if you'd done a lot of family history, had you done much British Isles research before, or was that something new to you?
You had.
I had, because I'm 1/3 Welsh and a little bit of English and Scottish, and throw in some German. I'm a little bit of a European mutt. So I had done a little bit. And so I had found, documents. Once the internet was available, it became so easy. But even back in the day with microfiche, you could find the documents of your family in Wales and England in the 1800 census, because my family, basically, nearly all of them came, between about 1830. Well, some of them came, with Jamestown in the 1600s and, on the Mayflower, but a lot of them came in the 1800s, like mid 1800s. And so you could go back and find those census records in in Wales and England. And my ancestors were so good about saving all of these things. We actually have letters back and forth from a little old shoemaker in Wales talking to his daughter who had immigrated to America in the mid 1800s, telling him that, he felt abandoned and why did you leave me? And so I love those stories, and, just keeping track of your ancestors.
So this must have been quite a change of gear, though. So for your own family, you have all that information. Then you meet Michael, who says he's an orphan. And so what details have you got to start off with, Michael? So you've told Susan you're an orphan. Do you know your birth mother's name?
I had, my adopted parents gave me a birth certificate. They also told me where I was born, and it was in the Wembley area outside of London. And I was born at a hospital. Susan has a lot more detailed paperwork on it now. But what I knew was I was born outside of a hospital. I was baptized at a church in England. And my mother was from Dublin. And she took us, my sister and I, on a pram and got on a train back from London to Wales, and then got on the B&I boat back into Dublin. But then she had a problem. She didn't want to be seen on the boat. She did not want to be recognized, because to be pregnant and single in Ireland was a major sin. So she hid on the boat as best you can hide on a boat on the ferry. And she ran into a porter on the boat. Was her first cousin's husband, and he said to her, Betty, that was her name, "What are you doing? And what is going on here?" And through sobs, she had to tell him.
So she was, as you say, you mentioned your sister there, so it's important to say your mum, she wasn't just a single mother of one baby, she actually had twins, didn't she? Your twin
Yeah,
sister.
twins.
And at the time, that must have been devastating for your mum to have had her secret uncovered by this relative who's a porter on the boat. But to your subsequent research, that was such a lucky break, wasn't it? Because otherwise, the family...
She would have been completely successful in hiding the pregnancy and deliveries from her entire family. And the fact this man saw her and helped her with the help of his mother-in-law, Mike's granny's sister, and his wife, because they were, the 93-year-old first cousin of Mike's mom was still alive when we first found family. And so she had all of this knowledge and literally said to us, I think I know I am still alive. You needed to know your story. You needed to know that your mother had no choices and that she would have loved to have met you. And it was just such a healing experience to have met that woman. It was amazing.
As the story goes, Helen, is that this porter on the boat was the husband of my mother's best friend, her first cousin. And when they got there, he said, you must come stay at her house, which evidently my mother did. And then this woman, the porter's wife, her name was Maura, speaks about changing my diaper, speaks about taking care of me. That's a very loving situation. And she was pregnant with her own situation. And the bottom line is they then had to walk my sister and I to a door in Ireland off of Grafton Street and hand us over to the nuns, and the door closed and paperwork was signed. But the bottom line is, as Susan just mentioned, 2014, 2015, we met Maura again as a 90-year-old woman.
Amazing. It's amazing. I mean, so your research, although it's been such a tough story, you have had some lucky breaks, haven't you? So
yes.
In the book, you mentioned about a search engine as well. So Susan, you're clearly an experienced family historian. So what difference did having a search engine make? What sort of thing could they do that you just weren't able to?
Oh, sure. Well, when we first started looking in 1995, the internet was totally not available. And, we got the message from the nuns eventually, 3 or 4 years in that his mother had died. We knew that her death certificate had to have been available, but it was just so hard, in another country, how do we gain access? And so by 2014, we were about to be able to travel for the first time to Ireland, since Mike had left, 50 some odd years ago. And so I started Googling the name of the orphanage because we had some immunization records from Michael as to where he came. And that's really all we knew. We knew his birth mom's first name. We knew the name of his birth father as listed on the birth certificate, although it was not accurate. But and that's all we had. And so we found by Googling the name of this place where he was in Kilkenny, all sorts of references to abuse, that it was a place rife with abuse. And it referenced the name Banished Babies of Ireland. And it was actually a book written in 1996. And through finding Banished Babies of Ireland, Googling that again, we found the Adoption Rights Alliance. And this is a group of people in Ireland and England and the United States. Some people are adoptees, some people are the birth mothers or family members of birth mothers, and they are all trying to, and there are thousands of people in this group, and now it's a Facebook group now that Facebook's available. They're helping one another, trying to find family or research their heritage or whatever they can do. And they have people on there who are in Ireland who are really skilled at going to the bureau or to find the birth records or the adoption records, because people up until this last October had absolutely no access to their birth certificates if they were born in Ireland and adopted. And so this woman literally within 48 hours had Michael's mom's death certificate, and which subsequently helped us find these wonderful people in Ireland who said, yes, I think I can help you because I know that my mother was involved in helping hide you as a baby when you came from London. And so, these people could have said no, but they didn't. And it was through the death certificate in 1998 that we were able to find the informant on that document that eventually helped us find family. And, there were just so many other little points in the story where we said, okay, well, how are we going to find these people? They had such amazing history with, in the Irish Revolution, the granny was running guns for the revolutionaries. And so it was just such a brilliant thing. So we Googled the name of the address that they were in the 1901 census. And all of a sudden pops up this fellow in Australia who turns out to be also descended from Michael's great-great-grandfather's family, but his family went to Australia in the late 1800s. Mike's family stayed in Ireland, and he had done all sorts of research on the Cleary family and the Irish, independence connection. And so all of these little pieces, we just followed all of these little pieces and just found this treasure trove of information that led us to finding more family that we now meet with every year that we go over to Ireland. We meet with these dear people that we found through all of just following these little bits of clues. It was just so fun. And England. Yes, England and Ireland. We've got people in both places.
So you mentioned in amongst all those exciting details, so you're finding so much information, but you mentioned that the name of the birth father was wrong. So what information did you have about your father? Like, what was the starting point for finding out about him?
Well, I have to tell you just a little story. We were called and received a phone call from the BBC. The BBC heard about our story, and they had 3 or 4 other stories. And so they came to California. And
what year are we in roughly?
It was March
15?
of 14.
14.
It was just before we left, and we left on the 14th of March. So it was early March.
The fellow that came was Martin Sixsmith, that wrote the movie or the book Philomena. And so he came with keen interest to follow our story. We have a link to that we could send to you, as a matter of fact. And he had a lot of questions, and we had a lot more questions. So they followed us over to Ireland, hid in the bushes while we walked into the orphanage. And I'm just going to tell you the story about that because everything involves around me, stories. So we came to the orphanage. We had an appointment with the head nun. And we sat at a table. I felt like I was at the principal's office of the elementary school I attended. And she says to me, we don't know. We apologize to tell you your mother has died. All the
Years
while,
ago.
we had been asking about my mother. Tell us about my mother. We don't know about your mother. Finally, they know that she's died. So they knew about her, obviously. And then we are at this table and I said, what's my father's name? Who was my father? We don't know. We don't know, Michael. We don't know his name. And then Susan says immediately to her, this is key, well, then it was an illegal adoption if you don't have both signatures. And she said, no, here's his signature right here. And that was in a matter of 2 minutes. We don't know his name. Here's his name. Here's his signature, because they wanted to prove that he had signed off on the pregnancy and the adoption. Oh my gosh. So his name was Patrick Ryan. And so we left the orphanage a little frustrated, a little bit not happy, if you follow what I mean. And we went out on a mad search. But Patrick Ryan is about the most common Irish name you could possibly find in any part of Ireland. So it was,
Yeah.
I mean,
in fact, the nun kind of smirked when she handed it to us, because it was like, good luck with this.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
truly it took 18 months to find the right Patrick Ryan. Because if you looked in, we went home from Ireland, and we just dove right in, and it was there were over 100 Patrick Ryans born between 1907. I give myself a little range, 1907 to 1909. Born in Dublin, there were over 100 Patrick Ryans born. But from the documents that we eventually got from the Rescue Society in England, and a little bit from the Irish people and his mom's family, we had all of these little snippets. So we knew that Patrick Ryan, how old he was. We knew that he had 2 sons. We knew his address in 1960, because it was from his solicitor that the letter was given to us by the nuns that said, my name is Patrick Ryan. I live at this address. These are my solicitors, and my solicitor, and we are his solicitors. And Patrick Ryan has no objection to the adoption of the children. He acknowledges that they are his children. So we had this address. And so I just thought, how in the world are we going to find Patrick Ryan, who lived at this address in Luton, England in 1960. So I went on ancestry.com to the website, and there's a pretty good search engine in that. And so I plugged in Patrick Ryan, born in 1907 to 1909, and I plugged in that address. I looked for Patrick Ryan's in public trees. And so there were, I think, maybe 6 or 7 public trees that had a Patrick Ryan born during that time. And so we wrote a little snippet in ancestry.com in the message situation to all of those tree owners, and one person responded. And that person said, I do have a Patrick Ryan in my tree. Yes, he did have 2 sons. Yes, he was born in 1907 in Dublin, and he played in a band. So we had all of these little snippets. He says, but I can't imagine that he's your father. Let me do a little bit of investigation. Well, this person could have just blown us off as somebody who was trying to be fraudulent, or just totally, because there are some people who you approach and they ghost you, right? Or they block you. But this genuinely wonderful person took it upon himself to do some research. Turns out we found the right Patrick Ryan. He was Michael's first cousin. And for all of the DNA nerds out there, we've also proven it eventually with DNA testing. Because that wonderful cousin, Noel Fanning, came back as a first cousin in the DNA matches as well. So
you kind of cross your fingers, right? At that one moment for the DNA result.
But it all turned out that we found the right Patrick Ryan.
So this is all taking many, many years, isn't it? From when you first met at university, these conversations, the letters, the traveling to Ireland. Even when you get to Ireland, it's hard to get information out of the organisations, and through the correspondence you have, and that's clear through the book. That was really challenging as well. So I guess I've got kind of 2 main last questions I'd like to ask. One is, like, to somebody else who's in your shoes, like presumably now, is the situation easier if people are going to try and trace their birth families if they were a banished baby? Is the situation easier for them to trace their birth families? Have some of the walls been knocked down? Is there more transparency?
I would say, we started in probably 12, and it was terrible.
Well,
It was
95 when we first started.
95, but
1995, it was just letters.
right, but it was phone calls, letters. But as soon as the DNA opened up, that opened up a whole new world, and it opened up a confirmation. You can say to a Patrick Ryan family, "Hey, we think that we are related." The DNA confirms it when someone on the other side is willing to take the test, which we were successful with. And what it does for them on the other side, it confirms in their heart, they have to accept the results. They have to say, okay, we accept it and we love you. And that's something else unto itself that is stunning. Mm-hmm. So we found that obviously the DNA is unquestionable, and it's just absolutely joyous. I mean, it really is. We have a joyful relationship with these people that live in Luton. A brother, his wife. Just a quick story about the brother. When we got to Heathrow, we flew into Heathrow. My new niece and nephew picked us up. We drove to Luton about 50 minutes, and we were gutted, if you would, about not knowing what was going to happen. We don't know. And we got to the door of the house, and my sister-in-law threw her arms around me with tears in her eyes and said, "Welcome."
Yeah.
But the documents themselves are so much easier now because you've got the internet, you can readily access birth certificates and death certificates online. You don't have to wait for the mail or somebody else to access them for you. There are all sorts of organizations that will help people who either through DNA or through documents or just these people. Adoption Rights Alliance have helped, I'm sure, hundreds, maybe even thousands of people, either birth moms or adoptees who are finding, looking. There are birth registers, and the fact that Ireland just passed the law in last year in October with the opening of this, it's now online. You literally go online with the adoption, let's see, it's AAI, Adoption Association of Ireland. I believe if you were adopted in Ireland, there's a whole group of people who are willing to look through all of your files, and the files are now centrally located, and people are getting names of birth mothers and birth fathers that they've been trying to get for decades. And so that has just absolutely opened up possibilities for people.
So just now, the end result of all this hard work, as well as finding some fabulous new relations, some family, which have been thoroughly loving and welcoming, which is obviously brilliant. The other end result is your book, isn't it? The Isle of Hope. So as I said at the start, I have read it and it is excellent. So what point did you realise that all of your research and all the stories you'd encountered, the lucky breaks, the frustrations and obstacles you'd faced, when you thought this has got to be a book? And how did you go from having a massive pile of research notes and get that into a book, a story? How did that happen?
Well, if you look back over a life, and my life is rather interesting, to be honest, turmoil, ups and downs, dark shadows, and then light in the end. And you realize this is what a book is made of. But it's a real story about a real individual. And I find that telling the story might be helpful for other people to be able to get through the dark moments and find light in the end of the tunnel with a marriage, through children. Susan's my best friend, and Susan is an incredible genealogist, and I satisfied her desires for genealogy. But the bottom line is, you have to have a story sometimes that talks about the difficulties and how does someone get to the end of joy and happiness. And I think that's what the book does. It is a joyful journey, and I'm a very happy person. I think generally, Susan says I'm extremely well gifted in the art of comedy and joy. But the bottom line is, you have to figure out that no matter what, you can get through these things. You can find joy and happiness. And genealogy is a wonderful, wonderful tool. We have just seen such great outcomes, and I pray for everybody's great outcome.
Absolutely. And I remember the first time you talked about the book, I was a little bit shocked because I thought, oh my goodness, this is going to take us years. And indeed, it took us 9 years. But you were standing in your mother's graveyard with Martin Sixsmith and the BBC producers. And you said, Martin, my story needs to be written. When I get to the point, can I reach out to you for some advice? Because he had just written Philomena, which had become a Hollywood movie, which had, won an Oscar. And we're standing there freezing cold, the most cold I've ever been in this March day in Ireland in the cemetery. And you're saying, I'm going to write a book. And that was the first time. And that was in 2014. So it took us almost 10 years.
Mm-hmm. So now this spring, the book came out and it's available on Amazon, isn't it? It's available as hardback and paperback and Kindle. So it's really easy to get hold of. So if anybody, it's great if you want a life story, as Michael says, it's very good if you just want an uplifting story. And of course, if you want to find out about just the history of the banished babies, as well as how to do it yourself, and just somebody's life story. I had to keep pinching myself and saying, this is somebody's actual life story. It's not just a story. And that's the difference, isn't it, with family history?
Right.
Absolutely.
But family history brings it all together, doesn't it? I mean, it's just an incredible story. And there's so many, there's just, and may I just tell you one last story? We have an 80-year-old cousin on my side, my mother's side. She has a husband that's now 85. His name is Philip. Philip has been blind his whole life. And Philip and Susan and I and his wife, we were in a pub in Ireland. We were eating. He's, again, as I mentioned, blind. And he turned to Susan because she was a genealogist story. He says, Susan, the other night I had a dream. And in the dream, the old can't stand it. The old ones came to me, and he said, I recognized them. And they said to me, we want to be found.
Yeah.
So there's a purpose to this work. There's a real purpose to this work. So
absolutely. It was an amazing moment, because truly Philip's wife, Michael's first cousin, had been estranged from her family since she was a baby. Her father had died. Her father was Mike's mom's brother, and her mother took her away from the paternal family because they didn't get along. And so she had been obsessed with finding out about her paternal family. So Philip had done all of her genealogy. He does it through voice, and I mean he's been an archivist his whole life, even though he was blind. And they had done so much research on her paternal side that she was completely estranged from. And here she was in her 70s, and they had just generations and generations. And the funny thing is, before we found them, we had also found the names of all these people. And so we were able to get together and collaborate and see what we had all come up with. And we had come up with the exact same things. And so it was just wonderful to have your work validated by other people who had been working on the same lines. And it was just a joy to meet them. They're just precious people that we've found.
It as you said, Helen, it's a difficult book sometimes, but the joy in the end of the book, unbelievable. So
well done, both of you, for your determination. And you're clearly a great team, great research team too, as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for reading our book.
Both for your time.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.